All right, so I was away last week, and some of you missed me, and some of you didn't. It's okay. I didn't miss you either, but we do the groups that we cooperate with, and so I'm gonna take it just a few moments to explain Baptist ecclesiology and beliefs, and we're going to go over this in depth. Probably sometime in the next 12 months. We're going to do a full Wednesday night study on it. But one of the things that separates Baptists from every other denomination is the idea of local church autonomy. And so what that means is there is no higher group who can tell First Baptist Church what to do. We are the ones who own our property. We are the ones who make the decisions for our congregation. We are the ones who hire staff. We are the ones who decide where resources are needed. As we support other ministries such as Mount Jubilee Ministries or the Baptist Children's Home or Project Lost Sheep or any of the even any of the groups that we cooperate with. Nobody dictates to us where our money goes because we are locally autonomous. At the same time, we have willingly chosen to cooperate with different groups. Within the Southern Baptist Convention, those are separated into three different levels. You have SBC National, which is all of the Southern Baptist churches in the United States, roughly 47,000 churches. That number is probably about right. The actual membership is inflated like you wouldn't believe. There are people on rolls who are no longer with us and actually citizenship in heaven, and they are still on somebody's roll. But about 47,000 churches. We also cooperate on the state level. For us, that's the Baptist State Convention of North Carolina. And then on the local level, which is for us is the Dan Valley Association. That's the churches in Southern Baptist churches in Rockingham County. We do have one in Caswell County, but they are actually, they're shutting down this summer. And so that will be one less within our local area, our local association. Mike, did you have a question?
Does the SBC convention include churches from other countries?
There are messengers from other countries. We see them there each year, but in terms of we are not technically considered a global church, and so we do not have separate areas where. So, for instance, one of the big contentions several years ago within the United Methodist Church was the UMC is a global church. And so they have, a European conference and an African conference and an American conference and all these different things. The Southern Baptist Convention is just one conference, even though some of the churches that missionaries go and they plant, they do contribute funds back to the convention, and they do send messengers back to the convention because they have that right because they have contributed funds back to the convention. So you will not hear us described as a global denomination, but we do have messengers and churches in other countries. Yeah, that's a good question. So that's kind of polity wise, it's always a little bit hard for people to understand Baptist polity because the Southern Baptist Convention is considered to be the largest Protestant denomination in the United States, but the Southern Baptist Convention doesn't themselves consider themselves a denomination because they have no control whatsoever over their churches. It is a purely cooperative endeavor that these churches come together, pool money, pool resources for the sake of the gospel. And so there is no, if you give $1 to the Southern Baptist Convention, they will consider you a Southern Baptist church, and you get at least one messenger to the convention. And so there's no quota that you have to meet to be part of the group. It's purely cooperative. It's not designed to be a denomination as denominations are organized, or the way that we think denominations are organized. Okay, so the way in which the convention, just a rundown of the way in which the convention typically works. I'll describe it as a 2-day long business meeting, is what the SBC is, with some times broken up for worship and other things. But at this time, you get the SBC entity reports. So what's an SBC entity? I'm going to go over each one briefly and some of the things that they discuss. But the International Mission Board is an entity. North American Mission Board, Lifeway is a Southern Baptist entity. Guidestone, as well as the ERLC and a few others. Then you also have auxiliaries such as the WMU and some of these the other entities of the convention. The executive committee will give a report. So while the SBC and the state convention elect presidents each year to sort of be the face of the convention, they also have it's a CEO is what it is. And that person handles the day-to-day business of the association, making sure everybody gets paid, making sure they have a place to meet and that sort of things in the subsequent years. And so the executive committee gives reports. We have a sending ceremony for the commissioned IMB missionaries. Each of the seminaries give a report. They form resolutions, which is always interesting when resolutions are posed. I actually chaired several years ago. I chaired the resolutions committee of the state convention. And the very next year, they killed that committee and gave it to the board of directors. So, if you want to kill a committee, I'm your guy. We will pass it on to somebody else after that. Then you can make motions. It is a deliberative body, and so any one of the 12,000 messengers that were there can make a motion from the floor. Now they do follow a very strict Robert's Rules of Order within these conventions, and you will find out very quickly if you are out of order. Just one little side note. One of the jokes, there's a parliamentarian who makes sure that you're following Robert's Rules of Order, and they have like 4 or 5 assistant parliamentarians, and each of them, if there's a question, they'll talk it through. But there's one assistant parliamentarian, he's been doing it for years. He's been doing it for like 10 years. But when they get up to do the nominations for president, first vice president, second vice president, they get 3 minutes to do their nominations and give their speeches. And at about the time that time's running up, this dude will walk up and he will tap the back of your shoulder and just tap you real gentle. And after 3 minutes, if you're not done, he will come up and he will tap you a little firmer, And so it is now a kind of like SBC bingo. You try and get a selfie with this guy tapping your shoulder in the lobby and everything. But very, very nice guy. But do very strictly go by Robert's Rules of Order. They do what? Revised, yes. So they have gone through several. We always stay up to date with the revisions. Elect the officers for the next year. The president gives an address. There's a convention sermon. There's multiple worship services, and then of course there's exhibits and meetings and things like that all throughout the week. It is a 2-day long business meeting, with some of that business being very benign. So every year there is a resolution and appreciation for the city that hosts the convention. It is probably the only thing that gets a unanimous vote the entire time. But things like that are guaranteed, guaranteed acts of business throughout the 2 days. All right, I'm going to try and quickly go through some of these reports, just to update you on some of the things happening with our entities and the resolutions, and then we're going to get to the main amendment that's been making news and that sort of stuff over the past couple of weeks. So Guidestone Financial Resources is the former annuity board, and so Guidestone they are not an insurance provider. They're an insurance broker for the convention. And so, for instance, I get my insurance through Guidestone, but it is still North Carolina Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so they're kind of like a broker because each state's insurances are different. And so they do that, but their main thing is they provide an avenue for Southern Baptist employees to pay into a 403B, which is basically a 401k. So they provide you an opportunity to have a retirement account, because most churches don't operate their own 401ks or 403Bs for their churches. And so the individual can choose to take part of their salary package, designate that for their retirement, and then send it to Guidestone, and Guidestone will invest it for you. And even with all the stuff happening in Iran this year, pretty good investment so far, pretty good return in 2026, so pretty happy. This year they did make a push for anybody under 40 who wasn't already investing in a retirement account to do it, because there are tons of pastors, young pastors, people who aren't really that young that still don't have any type of retirement accounts, and so they're pushing to do that. They also gave a brief presentation, a very brief presentation. You guys may have seen this in the news recently, and if you haven't, then you might want to talk to some of your pastor friends. But there's a short window. I think it's like a 2-year window or something, where if a pastor had opted out of Social Security, they can start paying back in. And so typically when they opted out, that was it for life. You either do it or they created a window so that you can opt back into Social Security if you want to. So they didn't recommend one way or the other. They just gave some information about that. There was an emphasis on mission dignity, which our church does contribute some money to. This is mainly for pastors who pastored their entire career in very, very small churches and didn't have a lot of money to set aside for retirement. It's how the convention tries to help them and take care of them. And this is the only year I've ever been where there was no questions about or comments about insurance costs when the Guidestone president gave his report. I guess we kind of just given up and realized it's going to be very, very high. Insurance costs are going to be very, very high. We just accept it now.
Can I say something about
Yes.
dignity?
Mission dignity, yes.
Some of the people know, and some don't, that Dr. Allman,
Mhm.
who was pastor here at one time, then ended up pastoring non-Baptist churches.
Mhm.
So he was no longer paying into what is now Guidestone.
Right.
But he is now receiving a monthly appropriation from Mission Dignity.
Yeah, and so they do try. It's a difficult task anytime you're looking at subjective cases, case by case, and you have to make a decision who gets money, who doesn't. It's a difficult task, but they do try and take care of those those that they can.
And it's in our church budget.
It is.
It doesn't say Mission Dignity, it says retired
Pastors,
something.
yeah, but that's what it is.
it.
Yeah, that's mission dignity, yeah. The Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, if you come to these the past several years, you know I have a love-hate relationship with the ERLC. The ERLC is the Southern Baptist Convention. Essentially what it is, it's the political arm of the Southern Baptist Convention. They keep people in D.C., and they do some lobbying, but they also comment on things that are happening on Capitol Hill so that the Southern Baptist churches are aware of it. I go back and forth on this. 2 years in a row, there was a motion and a recommendation that we dissolve the ERLC. If that would have come up this year, I would not have voted for it. If it comes up next year, I might vote for it. I don't know. But it's they try and provide information. They also do certain things. For instance, the Psalm 139 project is part of the ERLC. This puts ultrasound machines in pregnancy care centers, and they placed their 100th this year, and it was in North Carolina. And that had a lot to do with Todd Unzicker, our executive director at NC Baptist. He really wanted that 100th ultrasound machine to be in North Carolina. So they do things like that, but primarily they contribute some resources to local churches. They elected a new president this year, Evan Leno, and so a lot of his report was just getting to know him. You really can't judge somebody who's been in the job for 2 months, and so not a very long report, but they did comment on that Psalm 139 project. There again, I don't know if the SBC should be involved in or should have a political arm as part of what they do. They get a incredibly small amount of funding from the SBC. It's not a large amount at all. But that, like I said, my thoughts on that are fluid. Love to have some conversations with you guys about it, because you could very easily sway me on this one, because I don't know if that's what we should be involved with as a convention. Lifeway also elected a new president, Ryan Blackwell. Many of you know that Lifeway does not have any more brick and mortar stores. They are purely online. One of the things that people aren't aware about Lifeway is they don't just sell literature, they also do research. And so they do a lot of polling and things like that, which is honestly really helpful. You get to see everything from average age of pastors in America and in the SBC. They do polling about that, all the way to views about certain issues within churches of the SBC. And so that type of research arm is actually really good. The new president did say that they were going to have, with their Sunday school material, with their VBS material, with everything that Lifeway produces for local churches, renewed emphasis on evangelism and discipleship as part of that evangelism. And so that's always good to say. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but you may, in the classes, the few classes that we have, even the kids classes that use that Lifeway material, if you notice any changes over the next 6 months, I'd love for you to tell me about it, because again, they have said that they want that renewed emphasis on, even within the local church, an evangelistic side to the literature that they're putting out. The IMB sending ceremony, this is always the most important and the most well-attended portion of the convention. They make sure to put this on Tuesday. We commissioned 68 new missionaries, and when I say commission, the SBC is paying their salaries. These missionaries do not go to churches and raise support. They are employees of the International Mission Board, who their time is spent purely doing the mission that God's called them to do in the country that God has sent them to do it. And so we commissioned 68 new missionaries to join roughly 3,600 missionaries, with about 3,000 MKs, missionary kids, who are on the field. One of the things that always gets a lot of people is, you will see, I'm gonna have to back away from the microphone here, so I'll try and yell. But you will see that some of them, like this young lady right here, as well as this couple right here, they get up in front of the convention and they tell who they are, where they're going, kind of a little bit about their background. They're sending church, wherever their local church. But some of them, like this young lady right here, this couple right here, they have to be behind the partition, and they're not even allowed to use their real names, because they're going somewhere that's restricted, and they can't openly send missionaries there. The past several years, I have noticed, probably the past 4 years or so, most of the commissioned missionaries we're sending are to these places. They're not to open places. And most of these young couples right here, they're not going by themselves. They've got kids that they're going to these restricted countries as well. And so you want to talk about a commitment to the gospel and what you're giving up and what you're risking for the sake of sharing Jesus with people. It is a manifested representation of what that looks like. And so that is always the highlight of the convention for everybody. The SBC remains the second largest mission sending organization in the world. Anybody know what the first one is? No? That's close though. Catholic Church. Yeah, Catholic Church. So, but it is, again, all of these, none of them raise their own support. Your cooperative program dollars, as well as the money collected from the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, is what pays their salaries, lets them go do the work so that they don't have to take time away from the field to go to churches and raise their support.
Right.
Yes.
Are our missionary friends in Guatemala still?
Roger and Vicky. All right, so
Still live down?
So Roger and Vicky were IMB missionaries for years, okay? And they were in Guatemala for years. And just like any other organization, just like any other mission sending organization, when you've been in a certain place for so long, you have to move personnel to a place that hasn't had a gospel presence. And so I guess it was probably about 10 years ago, they told Roger and Vicky, it's like, we appreciate the work you're doing in Guatemala, but we've been here for 60 years or however long the IMB's been there. We're gonna have to move personnel to a different place, and they always give them the option to go. It's not like, hey, thank you for your service, here's a gold watch, best of luck type thing. they give them options. So we can move you. We'll pay to move you. You'll keep your same salary, all that sort of stuff. But if they stay, they have to raise their own support. And so Roger and Vicky really thought Guatemala was where God was calling them to minister and live and die and everything else. And so they are not IMB missionaries, but they are heavily supported through NC Baptist. And so they technically raise their own support, but they are considered a mission partner of our state convention in what they do. Does that make sense? So they were IMB missionaries, but they when it came time for the IMB to pick up their personnel and move them to a different place, they really felt that God still wanted them to stay in Guatemala, and so they found other support, and they've been able to stay there. Yeah, it's a good question though.
You want me to tell the other story?
Which is what?
That the Elliots, Sarah has been to Honduras so many times.
Uh-huh.
The Elliots were here in Reedsville, went out from here, and the board decided that they should leave Honduras, and they went to
Iraq?
And they were killed 11 days after they were left.
Wow.
Less than 11 days.
All right, I'm going to move quickly through some of this. Each of the SBC seminaries give reports. We have 6 SBC seminaries in the United States, and so the state conventions start schools themselves, and so NC Baptist have started Wake Forest, Campbell, Mars Hill, Wingate, Chowan, Gardner-Webb. I'm missing a bunch, but the state conventions start their own schools. But then the national convention has 6 SBC seminaries. Gateway's in California, Midwestern is in Missouri, New Orleans is New Orleans. Southeastern is in Wake Forest. It's actually on the campus of the old Wake Forest University. That is where I went to school. And they had a new president. Danny Aiken's retiring this year. Scott Pace has taken over. I'm shocked they didn't ask me, but Southern.
Do you know Dr. Pace?
He was actually after my time there, but we see each other at ETS and some other conferences. So I had spoken with him before. Southern Seminary, which is where Al Moeller is, and then Southwestern, which is in Texas. Their accreditation had been on the ifs because of just some monetary stuff that had been happening with it. But they're back set, and their temporary accreditation was restored, so they're back on the up and up again. What is this? Oh, every seminary except for New Orleans reported record attendance at their schools this year. So the world is definitely a difficult place, but at least we have people being educated to take the gospel. And so that's a good thing. WMU continued tradition promoting missions, including Annie Armstrong and the Lottie Moon offering. The executive director, Sandy Wisdom Martin, did you know her, Shirley? She retired after 10 years of service, and so they welcomed Carolyn Fountain as the new president of the national WMU.
That's 2 different offices?
I think they're just changing the name, or they're consolidating the positions.
Well,
So.
I don't know. I haven't seen that in anything.
Yeah.
But I've not seen who is to succeed Sandy Wisdom Martin.
Okay. So it's if it's not Carolyn Fountain, I don't know my WMU politics.
Carolyn is succeeding the woman who went out as president.
Okay.
And Carolyn is from Louisiana and she's black.
Okay.
That's exciting. That she's the first black woman to head
The WMU. Yeah. So yeah. I tried to scribble notes as fast as I could. There was a lot of talking during that, and a lot of videos during that particular segment. Mission entity reports. So this is Send Relief, which is joint IMB and North American Mission Board. Much like NC Baptist Disaster Relief, NC Baptist Men, only again national level. They mobilized 60,000 volunteers last year. They also started Serve Tours, which is proactive rather than reactive, and so it's basically mission trips. They're going to Puerto Rico, places like that haven't been hit by a natural disaster, but have issues, whether it's because of poverty or something else. And so this is more of the Send Relief is, and NC Baptist on mission are largely reactive. You know, something hits, hurricane hits, and we're going to go. And so the Serve Tours are intended to be proactive towards that end.
Send Relief has supported a lot of work in Nigeria.
Okay, good.
Through
Yeah.
Diana and
They do a lot in Puerto Rico too. I know. I mean, they do a lot in Puerto Rico.
A soybean project that Angel was in charge of was part of this report.
Send Relief.
Mhm.
Good. Yeah. IMB, the commissioning ceremony kind of takes a lot of the thunder from the IMB, but we have missionaries in 155 countries. The average tenure for our missionary is 14 years, and so Shirley, you were like double that. You're
35.
yeah, you're twice as good there. NAM, I'll just say this: NAM has had some issues over the past several years. If you've been following that, kind of a lack of confidence in NAM right now, but they're still doing a lot of good things. Send Network has continued to have increase. Baptisms and all of SBC churches have increased for the 5th year in a row. And so a lot of that is due to emphasis by the North American Mission Board, but they've had some pretty negative they've had some pretty negative press, and they also had some pretty negative feelings within the SBC. But you know, I try not to throw stones until you're on a stage that big. I mean, I'm sure they got a lot of stuff going on. Committee reports. Here again, 2-day long business meeting. The one thing that I will say is the Credentials Committee, and I've got some updated numbers on this too, because here again, they were throwing a lot of info. They retasked the Credentials Committee about 8 years ago they're the ones who fielded any requests about churches who are not in friendly cooperation with the SBC. And so they get a lot of these over the last 7 years. So these numbers are like from the past 3 years. Over the last 7 years, there have been 800 churches that have been referred to the Credentials Committee for them to review whether or not they're in friendly cooperation with the SBC. Okay, just a little bit of breakdown on what those actual numbers of those 800 churches were. There were 58 reports out of the 800s. Only 58 reports of churches with women who were serving in a pastoral role. The overwhelming majority of those reports over the last 7 years were issues of, you know, some people will say sexual abuse, some people will say sexual immorality, because they also include churches where pastor got caught having an affair and the church didn't dismiss the pastor. And so stuff like that. Those churches will get referred as well. But, you know, all that to say, this is the group who, when the convention has to vote on whether or not to disfellowship or not, this is the group that it goes to first. And they have to review it. Overwhelmingly, they'll review and they'll find that it was a misunderstanding of some kind, and the church was in friendly cooperation all along. A lot of the time, like this year, they had 10 churches that just this year they had 10 churches that were of legitimate concern, and out of those 10 churches, 7 of them didn't even realize they were still in the SBC. And so a large part of it is you know, somebody from the church gave money to the SBC, and boom, you're now on the list. But that's what the Credentials Committee does. And by the way, I'll have this PowerPoint available for anybody who wants to. I can email it to you. I can send it to you, and you can look at it some more. Executive Committee report. 12 recommendations were brought by the Executive Committee. 3 received special attention. 51% of the budget was allocated towards the International Mission Board. And so the cooperative program puts all of the money given by the SBC churches in a pot. 51% of every dollar, so 51 cents on every dollar that is given to the cooperative program goes to international missions. So over half. It's been at 50 for years, and they've been trying to tick it up above 50. And so 51%. The next highest one is the North American Mission Board. The next highest one is the seminaries. And then if you look at it on the pie chart, about that much money goes to both the ERLC and the executive committee. And so it's overwhelmingly international missions, and then North American missions, and then theological education for pastors is where most of that goes. There was a task force report on ministry and outreach to disabled persons. If you take every disability, so that's whether it's being deaf or there's some kind of physical disability, whether it's being mentally handicapped, if you take all disabilities and lump them into one group, they are the single most unreached people group on the planet. And so they're going to try and put some things together to reach out within communities to help with this particular subgroup. And then there was a discussion, and this was the day that Sawyer was with me. So every 5th year, they try and send the convention to the West Coast. And the Phoenix Convention Center, something's wrong with that. The Salt Lake City Convention Center is being remodeled or something like that. And so for the next 3 times we go out west, it's going to be in Anaheim, California. And there were some people not happy about going to Anaheim, California, because the overwhelming majority of Southern Baptist churches are in the South. And so, it was just, the whole interaction was kind of funny. You got people, and then you got people from California who were getting up and saying, well, we come across the country every year. You guys, I don't think it's too bad for you guys to come to us one out of every 5th year, and that sort of thing. And one of them said, people in California, we love Jesus too. You can come out here but anyway, all that to say, that was comical, but we will continue to meet every 5th year in the western part, and they kind of try and divide that up. North Carolina does not have a convention center that will seat 20,000 people, and so North Carolina will never have the Southern Baptist Convention unless somebody decides to build a convention center that will host up to 20,000 people. Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good point. But those were I just thought those were comical. 11 resolutions were presented and passed. Again, some of these are appreciation for the city of Orlando, resolution on finishing well in ministry, things like that. But a couple of notable ones. There was one about the 250th anniversary of America, which I thought was nice. There was one on the appreciation of bivocational pastors, which was presented and voted on and affirmed, and everybody clapped. And then there was a question. There was a question about one of the people on the committee, because they try and have one pastor and one layperson from each state on most of these committees. And there was a question because this state had 2 pastors. And so they looked at it, and the committee consulted, and it turns out that based on the bylaws, that if you're not a full-time pastor, you're counted as a layperson. And so we pass a resolution appreciating bivocational pastors, and then if they're not full-time, we tell them they're considered lay people. And so it's which is, that happened. I was like, there's something going on here. But anyway, assisted suicide and sanctity of life, political violence and speech. That was purely motivated, I think, by the Charlie Kirk assassination. Not that it shouldn't have been. I just as you heard people speaking about it, that's clearly what it was on. Immigration, human dignity, and the rule of law, anti-Semitism, and on the nature and importance of physically gathered church in a digital age. I'll just say this: if you're watching, come to church. We'd love for you to come to church. It'd be great if you would physically gather with the body. But there again, all these resolutions, I've got copies of each one of them if you'd like to read them in full. You can also find them online. You can find any of those and read them in full as well. But they're just too long. I'm not going to read all 11 of them to us tonight.
But you can also watch the convention.
You can watch the full convention too.
On YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, you can watch the full thing too. Election of officers. President Willie Rice from Florida was elected, who was considered a reform candidate. I don't know what that means. I don't know how much reform there's going to be. First vice president was Craig Carlisle, and then the second vice president was Alan Murray, who is actually the president of the NC Baptist Convention. He's a pastor of a church of about 70 people in Supply, North Carolina, and he was elected second vice president of the convention. So Good for Alan. Good guy. Mike loves to fish. You two would get along. You two would get along very well. All right, Truth and Unity Amendment. This is what was the big story within the SBC. Before we go over this, let me just answer this question. Since the amendment to the Constitution was passed this year, what changes about the SBC? Absolutely nothing. It's the exact same it was for the last 30 years. If it gets ratified next year with another 2/3 amendment, what changes about the SBC? Absolutely nothing. It was the same way it's been for the last 30 years. And so all this does is put formal language into the Constitution of what has been the practice for, I would say from inception, but definitely since the conservative resurgence, which officially ended in 91, I guess. So the amendment is to be added to the Constitution, Article 3, Paragraph 1, which all of those enumerated parts of the Constitution start by a cooperating SBC church will, and then it lists all of these enumerated things. The amendment says does not act to affirm, appoint, or endorse a woman serving in the office or function of pastor, elder, overseer, specifically preaching to the assembled congregation. And if you've been watching the news, you know that passed with 74% and needed 2/3, and it passed with 74% of the vote. This same amendment, this is the 4th year that has come up in some form, in some shape or fashion. I voted against this thing 3 times. This year, I voted for it because I think the language was changed. I was worried the past 3 years that it could impact associate level positions, the way that they had it worded, rather than senior pastor positions. I think clarifying the language helps a little bit, as well as the function. I really have no doubt that it's going to pass again next year with the 2/3 requirement. And again, what is it going to change about SBC life? Absolutely nothing. It will continue as it has always been. It's just putting that language in the Constitution and bylaws. If you want a theological explanation as to why the actual amendment was put forward, when we went through 1st and 2nd Timothy last year, and so I had to look it up because I don't remember, but it was February 12th of 2025. And the title was Leadership in the Lord's House, and it was labeled on the website as 1 Timothy Part 4. We go through 1 Timothy 2, that section that is at the core of this particular amendment. And so if you don't remember that, or you want to re-look at it, again, that was February 12th of 2025, Leadership in the Lord's House, from 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 8 through 15. And we spent a Sunday morning through the sermon sort of going through why that particular, what was meant by that particular scripture and how it applies and how it doesn't apply to us, because we don't want to claim less for the Bible and follow less of the Bible than the Bible claims, and we also don't want to claim more for the Bible than the Bible claims. And so I think that this amendment, rather than the one from the past 3 years, clarifies that a little bit. But again, mainstream media, one of their field days throughout the year is the week of, after, and probably 2 weeks after the SBC convention. So I'm sure you'll probably still be hearing a lot of it over the next few days. But again, nothing changes from how the convention was operating before and how it'll continue to operate, how it'll operate after. So I've got just a few minutes, and when we're down to about 5 minutes, so if you guys have to leave, you can. I'll stay here and talk to whoever wants to about any questions that you might have. But I'm just going to leave that up just so you can look at it in case you have any questions about that particular amendment. But questions or comments? We got nothing?
Well,
I was going to say, we're all family here. I mean, this is the time.
Okay, kind of keeping this with what you were just talking about. A page or two back, there was something on there about 58 churches that had women pastors.
That, yeah.
What happened, what was that all about?
So some of them were the overwhelming majority of them were investigated, and you found out that they were like associate, they were worship ministers, or they were children's ministers, or youth ministers, or things like that. They weren't senior pastors, and they weren't teaching and exercising authority amongst the full congregation. And so there were a few. So in 2023 and 2024, churches were dismissed out of the convention. And one of those was Rick Warren's church, Saddleback in California. But at least two of those, one of them came with what I would say a spirit of humility and that sort of thing. But at least two of them, Saddleback and then the other one from Kentucky, they knew that they were going to get disfellowship. They were kind of just there to make a point. And so I do not think that Rick Warren's speech at the convention that year painted him in a great light, even though he had retired. And so they have, since I have been in ministry within the SBC, I think we have dismissed 4 churches for having female senior pastors. We've dismissed a slew of them for officiating homosexual services, ceremonies, and things like that. And then a couple for that same year that we dismissed Rick Warren's church. There was one who had a pastor who had been, I think he had worked out a deal, but it was a conviction on some type of sexual assault. And the church forgave him and brought him back on as their pastor. And so they disfellowshipped that church for that reason. But
What actually happens when you disfellowship someone?
so they are not they're not allowed to have messengers come to the convention to make motions or vote on issues.
They can go if they want to listen.
Well, you still have to register as a guest because they won't let you in the convention hall, because otherwise everybody and their brother would be picketing, all around the convention hall while the convention's going on. So they would have to be registered as a guest. But if they were registered, then they could go. Or if they had a press pass, if they were there for journalistic reasons, they could go.
So is there like a blacklist?
No, I mean, and there's a pathway. There's a pathway to come back into fellowship as well, if they wanted to do that.
But you may not know that there are a number of churches, I don't know how many, who on their own have withdrawn
Oh, sure.
from the Southern
Yeah.
Baptist Convention.
Yeah, and it's typically not all of them, and I want to make that real clear. Not all of them, but I will say the overwhelming majority who have separated over women in ministry also separate over the LGBTQ issue and stuff like that. They're kind of linked together.
Well, they just might as well go on to be Methodist.
Well, I mean, there are over 200 different sects of Baptists, and so they can find a tent for sure. It's not. I don't think they heard you.
It could be
on the-
global Baptist,
Yeah.
global Methodist, it could be global Methodist.
Yeah, but that's a good question. But overwhelming majority of the ones of the last 7 years, since the credentials committee's kind of been tasked with this, the overwhelming majority, they investigate it and they find it was just some sort of misunderstanding, and they're kept in cooperation with the convention. Yeah.
So you think
And what pass only has to do with senior pastors?
Not necessarily. And so if you had an associate level minister who was doing a great deal of preaching, and when I say great deal, I mean probably any to the gathered congregation, and using that particular term, then that would be an issue for the credentials committee. Yeah. And that's where you get into the teaching and exercising authority portion of it, to the point of even associate level staff exercising that type of senior pastor authority. And just so we're kind of on the same page with that. SBCs holds that position. They have for a long time. The Presbyterian Church actually split over this issue and others several years ago. So the PCA holds this particular position. The Catholic Church holds this particular position, but there's a billion of them, and so nobody wants to pick a fight with them. But it's we're not the only one. The largest Christian church in America, the Catholic Church, and the largest Protestant denomination in America, the SBC, hold the same position in terms of women in the office of that senior pastor. The only difference is Catholics wouldn't think I'm qualified to be a pastor because I'm married. They can't be married either. Yeah.
The amendment doesn't seem to rule out associates.
No, not at all.
My
Well-
point is when it says elders, pastor, elder, overseer, wouldn't typically, if we had a board of elders, would not associate pastors.
Yeah.
Ryan, when he was.
Yeah.
Would he
So-
not be considered an elder?
Yeah, so the reason that they put it like that within the amendment, and this is one of the other things that separates us from Presbyterians, is that within Baptist ecclesiology, and always has been, pastor, elder, overseer, it's the same office. Yeah. So if you're saying, well, I'm an elder at my church. Oh, I didn't know you were a pastor. Oh, I'm not a pastor. I'm an elder. You don't understand what the Bible's saying, because pastor, elder, overseer is the same office. Presbyterians separate that into teaching elders and ruling elders, and so they separate it out. And they've got, they use 1 Timothy 5. They use their own type of interpretation for that. But within, I love my Presbyterian brothers. I just think they're wrong. But pastor, elder, overseer is the same office within.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
So you're saying that is limited to teaching or preaching pastors?
Well, that and I'm sure that if they use the term, if they labeled their employees pastors rather than ministers or directors or some other thing, you'd probably be getting a referral in some way because you're wanting to know. Yeah. Because you're putting authority onto that office that biblically would be reserved for men. Yeah. So that's where. But here again, even with this was put forth by Al Mohler, who's a president of Southern Seminary. All 6 of our Southern Baptist seminaries have female faculty who teach men who are going to be pastors. It's like, well, how in the world is that? Because they're not pastors. This is in the office, and here again, this is where it comes to not claiming more or less for the Bible than it claims for itself. We're talking about pastors in the local church who are teaching and exercising authority in the local church, not in a school setting, not in a business setting or a political setting or anything else. We're talking about in the local church. And so there again, I think the language is better. I think that it leaves less ambiguous than the past 3 years. Some of that amendment did. Any other questions or comments? All right. Good talk. We'll do it again next year. Let me pray for us, and then we'll dismiss. And I'll stay up here just a little bit if anybody wants to chat some more. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for what you have done. Thank you so much for the goodness and the grace that you show us each and every day. Lord, thank you for the group who has come together just to hear this report and to see where we're at in our cooperation, not for personal benefit, but entirely for the sake of the gospel. And so just ask you to watch over us, watch over the SBC, watch over the State Convention, the Dan Valley Association, all those that we cooperate with, to do this work of the ministry for your glory. Help us to do that, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.